This is a Tab Media special report with immediate past president of the Southern Baptist Convention, Bart Barber. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash, and I look forward to chatting with Bart today about some reflections on his past 2 years in the SBC president's seat. Bart, welcome.
Great to be here, Jennifer. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we are about 5 days out from when you handed that gavel over.
Mhm.
And I know there's been lots going on since then, so you probably haven't had a lot of time, a lot of downtime really, to think about it. But I'm excited to get you at this point. So you're still kind of fresh, it's still in your mind. Tell us a little bit about what your initial response, reflection, reactions are to. Let's start with Indianapolis, with the Indianapolis meeting, and then we'll work our way backward.
Well, I've always thought that the measure of a good business meeting is not the level of tension that you have along the way, but how much tension is remaining whenever the meeting concludes. The purpose of our annual meeting is for us to answer questions and resolve conflict. And by that measure, I think the meeting in Indianapolis was a great success. I think we have come to some good answers to some of the questions that we've been grappling with over the course of a few years. And certainly we never come to the point that everything is taken care of. That's why we meet every year. But I'm very optimistic about our ability to move forward with the decisions we made in Indianapolis.
Have you had any feedback coming your way since the meeting? I know sometimes you're the past president now and they move on, but I'm assuming you've got some relationships there that people are maybe still wanting to debrief. Have you had any initial feedback of how the general population's feeling?
Tons of feedback. Southern Baptists are and have been all along the way very gracious and prayerful and supportive people. And so most of what I've gotten in terms of feedback has just been people saying, thank you for serving. We think you did a good job. We love you. We appreciate you. Get some well-deserved rest. And so there's been quite a bit of that. I've also had a couple of people who've reached out to say, hey, at this moment in the meeting, you ruled this way, and can you explain that a little more fully? Or I'm not sure about that. And that just proves that we're still Baptist and independent minded. And all of those have been good, warm, cordial conversations. I've received those positive, helpful, prayerful, thankful communications from people all across the spectrum, really, in Southern Baptist life. It's not accurate to talk about one side versus the other side. We're like a 50-sided polygon of some kind, and so people from all sorts of different segments of SBC life have responded generally positively about the meeting.
Good, good. Now, if you can remember back as far as the June 23 meeting in New Orleans, can you put those two together and compare them in any way?
Um, for the entire length of your YouTube
You could do it.
video, and probably a 5-part installment, depending on what aspects you wanted to compare all of this to.
Right.
I think in New Orleans, we also had a productive meeting that helped us to resolve some questions partially, but obviously we had some questions that remained when we walked away from New Orleans, not because the meeting failed, but just because of the nature of those questions. We had a proposed constitutional amendment that had received 1 vote out of 2 that were pending, and so that question was still open. We also had a lot of task forces. I think in New Orleans, we had a messenger body who was primed to investigate and get reports back, looking for solutions, ways forward to some of the questions that we were facing. All of those task forces worked hard to try to bring back to the messenger body what they asked for. And by and large, those answers were received by the messenger body, not as though there's no unfinished business left, but the messenger body affirmed the direction that all of those processes had gone. And so in a lot of ways, not just getting somebody else up there to preside over the meeting, in a lot of ways, Indianapolis served as a wrap-up meeting for business that we had undertaken in New Orleans.
Oh, that makes sense, and it kinda matched your tenure as well. You mentioned the messenger body. One thing I've noticed in our coverage, we've been doing this for a long time, but in our coverage, we noticed, a difference in how the messengers are engaged in recent years. There's a new, or at least for us, it felt like a new emphasis on the messengers decided the messenger are asking the messenger's request. And I've noticed that language change and that, even that feel or that respect toward the messengers. Can you speak to that and maybe what changed in recent years to make that so so much in the forefront?
Well, I so I don't want to commit to the idea that that's been absent prior to the last couple of years. But I will say that for my part, I'm a thoroughgoing congregationalist. That's
Mhm,
something that shows up in my local church,
mhm.
and it's a theological position for me, something
Okay.
that arises out of an understanding of what the New Testament teaches about the binding and loosing authority that Jesus gave to just a gathering of people who, two or three people even, who were gathered in his name, that his presence would be there and that they would have this support from Jesus to be able to make decisions. I think that's an important part of our theology also because a large number of our churches are smaller churches that are going to be at some point in an interim position where they're not going to have anybody who's occupying the office of pastor, elder, overseer, and for those churches to function in between while they're looking for someone else, there's got to be some idea of congregational authority. So it's both biblical and practical. And so anyway, I believe that as a matter of divinely ordained structure. And so there's that theological conviction. On top of that, Jennifer, I have prayed the same prayer um, Monday night for 2 years in a row
Oh,
now,
goodness.
and, there are witnesses to this, for New Orleans, but the same thing happened also in Indianapolis, and I just prayed, "God, protect my heart, don't allow me to lose my love for the messenger body, no matter what it is that happens." And if somebody goes to the microphone and they're being a knucklehead, then call to mind for me times that I was a knucklehead and people loved me anyway. And so uh, I think that maybe it's helpful to say that I've deliberately cultivated not just a respect for, but a love for the
Mm,
messenger body of the Southern Baptist Convention.
mm, mm. And well, that's funny. We did notice, and I think that's interesting. Okay, so more behind the scenes look. Okay, so you're talking about when you're up there and you're dealing with who knows what's going to come to the microphones and what you're going to have. What's it like to just be at the podium through those 2 days and you intentionally put extra time back in um, to the session. So what's it like? Just tell us a little bit about just being up there behind the lights, seeing all the people, and not always knowing what's coming next.
So Friday, I'm taking my daughter to a PBR professional bull riding event, and it's a lot like that, I think, really, in that you're strapped onto something that you can't easily dismount, and you never know what turn is going to come next. And so it's exciting in a way to be up there. It's also it's a very intense mental task. And it, it doesn't have to be that way. You can surround yourself with other people
Mhm.
who are who are tracking everything and just kind of telling you what to say. But hey, that's not the way I want to do it. I've loved parliamentary procedure since I was on the parliamentary procedure team for the Future Farmers of America in high school.
We had a
And
feeling you had been doing that for a while. We just
well,
really
and I grew up in Baptist churches going to business meeting every month, but that that can be a good way to learn bad parliamentary procedure sometimes. Not because the people are bad. I know there are horror stories about congregationalism gone awry, but also just because sometimes in small churches like the ones I grew up in, nobody's got the footnotes to Robert's Rules of Order memorized in
Correct,
those
correct.
contexts, and there's just sort of there's a less formal understanding. Here's how we do meetings, but in FFA, I was trained on formal, accurate parliamentary procedure. And so that's part of it, is that I like that kind of thing. But the other part of it is it's just so much faster
Mhm.
if the presiding officer is tracking in his mind what motion's on the floor right now, and is somebody spoken for, somebody spoken against, and there's not the constant pause
Okay.
for further direction. And we had a lot of business to do. And I mean, who would have thought? You mentioned we added more time, we added a whole other session, and we still didn't finish the resolutions committee report.
Right.
And so we used every second of the time that we took to try to conduct the business that the messengers had wanted us to conduct. And so being able to being able to focus on that sort of thing, it's mentally challenging, but it's also something that I feel the demands of the clock the whole time that I'm there. I'm trying to I'm there's a time or two somebody goes to a microphone and they start to bring a point of order that's not really a point of order. And in those occasions where I cut somebody off,
Mhm.
and I say, well, it's not a point of order, your point's not well taken, let's go to microphone 5. That's not because I feel impatient with that person. It's because somebody else is waiting in line to do something that may be valid in order, and in order at that time. And I owe it to the aggregate messenger body to keep us moving on a good pace, and I owe it to the other messenger waiting with a valid point to bring, to get as quickly as I can to that next microphone, to that next person who has something to do.
Mm.
And so I'm juggling
Wow.
all that in my mind. And I would have thought probably a few years ago that in the midst of that I would be nervous, but actually I'm so into that task and it's so consuming. I don't feel at all the pressure of, hey, 14,000 people are looking at you right now.
Right. And who knows how many from online, right?
Yeah, right, right.
Right, right. Well, what about the future presidents who are not gonna have that level of parliamentary procedure, in their head, or that experience? How do you advise them on what to do in that moment?
Well, first, I would say, if you've got if you've got a good team of parliamentarians behind you, they can really help you. Al Gage has been amazing. One of the first things that he did was to send me not Robert's Rules of Order, but a book by a man named Hugh Cannon entitled Cannon's Rules of Order. He's not trying to replace Robert's Rules of Order. Instead, um, he's articulating a philosophy to go alongside the legal code that is Robert's Rules of Order. And I think that philosophy is something that's really helpful. And so I would say it's worth your while for whoever that might be in the years coming. It's worth your while to depend upon your parliamentarians, but also ask them to educate you a little bit before you come into the meeting.
Mm.
Develop some level of comfort with this on your own, and they'll do that. They'll be happy to help you be prepared to stand on your own 2 feet a little bit more.
Mm. Well, Clint Presley in his press conference right after he was elected as our next SBC president mentioned that what a great job you did, and he wishes in a way he was joking, but he wishes in a way you had not done such a good job because now he's got to follow that. What's some other advice you would give Clint and even the future people who are going to be elected president of the SBC?
Southern Baptists have not elected me to give advice to Clint Presley. They have elected Clint because they have confidence in him, and I do too. And I think I'm going to give you an answer, but before I give you an answer, I want to say that I have long thought that it's a measure of a person's character when they've been given some responsibility and some authority for a period of time. when that time expires, it's a measure of your character to be able to just let go of it
Mm.
and know that God's given that to somebody else. And that's my heart right now. I'm not the president of the Southern Baptist Convention anymore. Clint is, and God's going to empower him, and he's gonna lead us well. Um, I I will say though, just a couple of things, and I think Clint will do great at all of these things. One thing that I did that I think really helped is right after I was elected the first time, I launched a text message thread incorporating all of the officers. It's been the practice at some periods in the past, and for good reason, I'm sure, that I mean, the recording secretary has a job. The registration secretary, I mean, that's Don. His job is to
Gone,
be
right?
the icon of the Southern Baptist Convention. Most popular man in SBC life, and that's
I
hands
think
down. There's
I
no
think
doubt.
he is now. I think so.
He is. But the vice presidents have often been folks who just sat on the sidelines and they're no more involved than they were the year before when they weren't vice president. And so I appointed every officer to something this year, and to something beyond their officer capacity for them to be involved in the cooperation group. Or Jay Adkins led the GCR evaluation task force. And I've kept an active text message thread with those other officers just to kind of update them from time to time and seek their advice and get their input. And I did that without giving away that our Constitution puts in place a weak presidency and an even weaker vice presidency. And I didn't cede any of the authority of the president of the SBC away in doing that. I just sought input and developed a relationship there. I think that's important. I think it builds a good team, and so I would advise that lean upon your officers and let them help you a little bit. And then the other thing that I think I would say is um, it's important for president of the SBC to realize that you weren't elected just by a narrow coalition. If all you have is a narrow coalition, you don't get elected.
Mm.
And so I think it's important to represent not just the wishes of an interest group, but instead to represent the wishes of the messenger body as a whole and the collection of churches that are in the SBC. I think Clint will do a great job at all of that.
I wonder too to do that and to be the president of all in the SBC. There's going to need to be an awareness, ear to the ground, if you will, not caught in the officer bubble or the elitist bubble. You did an interesting job of staying really connected. Your social media, your you were funny, you were engaging, you were real. Uh, how what's that gonna be like, for you, number 1, to pull back on that and not be the front and center person in SBC life? And then number 2, what if, that's not Clint or future SBC president's style? How can they stay, in tune with the average person?
Well, first of all, I hope that you'll save this recording where you said I was funny and share that with my children,
Okay, good deal.
who are not entirely sure that
They
I
may not
achieved
they
that.
may vote against that, huh?
They may not agree. It may be a minority report to come out on that.
Alright.
But I think honestly, there are people in the SBC who would see my social media engagement as a negative rather than a positive. I've communicated with people who had that perspective.
Mhm.
I think there are people who like that. There are people who don't like that. I had not been president a week, and a guy got online and criticized me for engaging in humor about something and said that was, at this moment in time with so many things going on, that's beneath the dignity of the office of president. And I mean, I understand that. That's just somebody who has a different perspective on. I replied and said, "I'm not going to spend 2 years bereft of a merry heart." And that's who I am. Um, I think there needs to be freedom for people not all to have to fit the same mold of what a president of the SBC would be. I've not been different to be president of the SBC than what I was before. Um, I'm being different now as a post-presidential person. I didn't make a change coming into the presidency, but I'm making a change coming out of the presidency. Some of that's because, man, I'm just tired, and I need some rest. And part of it also is because I want to leave space. I think we have a new president now, and he's going to lead us, and and so I deleted my Twitter account off of my phone, and I'm still interacting with folks on Facebook and on Instagram, although I'm way too old to be on Instagram, but I'm trying. And
Again, you need to check with the kids, right?
so my daughter critiques everything about my Instagram feed. She said, "You're horrible at taking pictures." So but I'm staying connected with those things. But Twitter is really the space where, for right now, online, people are looking for official pronouncements of people in office and whatever. And so I'm happy to seed that ground for a while. And there'll come a time that I think probably there'll come a time that I engage a little more. If Twitter still exists at that time, that I'll engage a little more in some things like that. But that's going to be when I come to the point that people are just receiving that as Bart Barber and not as immediate past president Bart Barber.
Right, right.
And when I get back to the point that it'll just be me, then I'll be happy to come back in and engage the way I've engaged before. There's more than one way to be president of the SBC, and you don't have to be somebody doing all of that. As far as staying connected with the opinion of people in the SBC, well, if you travel, I learned as much traveling as president of the SBC than I did from feedback I got online. I learned better information because once you've been to state convention meetings in some of the more pioneer areas of the SBC, and I mean, I traveled more than I thought I was going to when I started doing this, and I went to meetings held by state conventions in uh, West Virginia and Illinois and Kentucky and Hawaii and California and of course Texas and South Carolina and places like that too. And then I went to things that were not SBC meetings. I went to individual churches. I went to First Baptist Jacksonville, Florida, and Heath and I were in different positions on some things, but we had a great time of meeting together. And I learned more about his perspective as I got a chance to visit with him about that. That helped me to be able to do that. I went to all of our seminaries. And I was able to hear perspectives from our students at all the different seminaries. And I went to Indian Falls Creek and I met with people from Myanmar Baptist Churches USA and really that sort of thing. People will invite you a lot of places to speak if you'll also make those occasions where you listen.
Mm.
And it's not hard to stay connected with who Southern Baptists are and what they think.
So spending time and being willing to listen
Yeah.
be important. Okay, so if I remember correctly, you have lots of years of experience working in Southern Baptist life at different levels and being involved in SBC convention, the convention level kinds of things as well. And I believe I remember you saying a few years ago, you did not anticipate nor plan to ever be SBC president. You might have even said it a little harsher than that. But then things changed. And then just a few days ago, Monday before the annual meeting began, you said how grateful you are for the 2 terms. The 2 terms you served. Tell us if it can come to mind yet, but what are your most favorite moments for from these last 2 years? And then also maybe your deepest regret and or the hardest moment.
Yeah, that's a deep question. Um, kind of like picking your favorite child. There have been so many amazing things there. Um, I've said a number of times, let's just do kind of a lightning round here, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Favorite event probably is Indian Falls Creek because I really didn't even know that existed, and it's in my backyard, and I pastored a church in Oklahoma right after Tracy and I got married, and we had Native American folks who were in our congregation, and I was aware of churches nearby us that were predominantly Native American congregations. Some of them had Native American church names, even. And so I'd been around these folks, and I didn't know that they had this big meeting where they all came together, and it's such an amazing meeting. So I enjoyed that. Um, um, uh, I really have enjoyed getting to know Sandra Wisdom Martin, who is the executive director of the WMU. She and I posed for a picture where I was wearing a Cardinals jersey and she was wearing a Cubs jersey,
I did
and
see that.
I love her
That's
anyway.
something about unity, right?
Yeah, yeah. I felt a lot more unified because we beat the Cubs Sunday night. The Cardinals
Okay.
did, uh, but anyway, that was a lot of that John Powell Memorial Toss. I was wearing that jersey because I'd just come from there. That's a pretty neat thing that we do every year at the annual meeting because we're just remembering a guy I knew, John Powell, a church planter, SBC pastor, who was saving people out of a wreck and got hit by an 18-wheeler that killed him while he was doing that.
Mhm.
And it's good about us that we remember people like that.
Mhm.
I got to visit the ILC and attend an IMB trustee meeting, and just the sense of lying in that bed and thinking, I wonder who has slept here before me
Mhm.
and where they've gone on this globe and what they've suffered and what they've accomplished. So all of those things are beautiful, wonderful, amazing things. To stand in Lahaina, Maui. I had like 12 hours in Hawaii in the midst of all of this. Nobody believes me when I say I went because nobody else could go.
Right,
But
right.
the
Yeah,
but
sure, we believe that.
yeah, but standing there with the pastor of Lahaina Baptist Church
Which is sad.
and hearing about his passion in the midst of all that devastation to reach people with the gospel and about how unified that church has become around that endeavor. All of those things have been things that have blessed me greatly. The hardest times, um, um, people will point to headlines, but I'll tell you, the hardest times have been the times when my church needed me or my family needed me, and I was somewhere else. A lot of the hardest times have been times when I packed a suitcase again and walked out the door and went to the airport and did not want to be where I was going. I wanted to be at home with a church or a family who needed me for something. But God sustained me through all of those times. The the amicus brief, the thing that people wound up making a motion to censure me about, that was a very difficult time. Involvement in other legal matters for the SBC, I had to go to court quite a bit. Those have been times that have not been good. Uh, it when we've had Willie McLaurin's failed candidacy and resignation at the executive committee, all the turmoil associated with trying to get somebody to fill that EC slot. Um, I look on those things and I think to myself, it makes me happy to think that um, that maybe there won't be future SBC presidents who'll have to do those things.
Mhm.
I like to think that maybe we've been through a very rough season and that some of these questions are being resolved maybe in ways that won't impact other people's presidencies.
Mhm. That makes sense, that makes sense, and I know that it's been a roller coaster of events for you these 2 years. So much coming out of what was already an insane season with the pandemic and then moving quickly into all the legal, as you mentioned, the legal issues
Yeah.
and the ongoing concerns, with the sexual abuse,
Mhm.
controversy and all that's happening there. What, at the end of the day, what do you hope that the historical archives will write about your time in this seat?
I hope that they'll say that because of the daily prayers of faithful Southern Baptists, he never had a day that he said anything that destroyed the Southern Baptist Convention, or did anything that brought it all to naught. Um, I'm 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 happy for it to be recorded as a base hit, Jennifer. I didn't need it to be a grand slam, didn't need it to be a home run. I wanted to know that after my moment of leadership, I handed the Southern Baptist Convention off to somebody else,
Mhm,
not worse than it was when I received it. And um, I feel like I've done that.
mhm,
I don't think that the Southern Baptist Convention is in worse shape now than it was 2 years ago. And, I'm, as far as what the history will record, um, so September of 2022, my first EC meeting as president, um, I'm standing around some folks who had not seen me since the election, and they're congratulating me. You're president of the SBC. Wow, that's amazing. You're amazing. Everything's amazing. And we were standing in a room about 20 feet away from a wall that had framed collages, if you will, matted uh, pictures of all of the presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention. We were near enough to see the photos, not near enough to read what was under them.
mhm,
And I identified a president from this century. Okay. We've been 24 years in this century. Okay.
mhm.
And I said, tell me who that is. And these are members of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist
Oh,
Convention. These are
no.
pretty plugged in to
Mhm.
SBC life. Not one of them could name that person.
Really?
And I said, that's me in 10 years. In 10 years, people look at this bald head on a picture and say, who's that? And I'm perfectly fine with that, because what matters in the SBC is not who the president of the SBC is. It's that it's that Jason and Nicole Zaruba are being called out of FBC Farmersville to go to Cape Town, Africa, and share the gospel with people over there. Our our presidents have been men, but our heroes have been women who have been serving out doing what really brings us together. We don't come together to have a business meeting and have a guy preside over it. We come together to send the gospel all around the world, and we have a business meeting because we have to have a business meeting to do that. And I welcome obscurity, and that's the way of history for the Lord is that He remains great and we fade, and so I'm content with that.
Mm. All right. Well, thank you for your service and your time sharing with us and reflecting. And I do hope you get to have that much needed rest that you
Thanks.
have yet to get.
First thing I've got to do is clean this office that has been stacking stuff up for 2 years now. So
You
that
know,
and then rest.
I think just toss it all in the trash and start fresh, you know?
Great idea. Great idea. Thank you, Jen.